Hey, what's happening, guys? Dan Darrow here with another Options and Play video update. During earnings season, I love these Friday videos because they really kind of get me into the mindset of what I should be looking at, what I should be planning for, kind of strategizing for the upcoming week, right? Just this week was super busy, just jam packed with big names basically every single day, and kind of having like this like already game plan in place. This is what I find personally, having like a game plan in place just helps me, just kind of like simplify things a little bit, right? Like I kind of already know where I'm looking, what I want to do, right? I mean, obviously things can change as we've seen a lot recently. Like having a game plan one day kind of gets thrown out of whack the next. But still, you like to have like what you're looking at, what the options are kind of pricing in, what the charts say, what the recent earnings were, right? So I always feel that these Friday videos just get me into that mindset of looking forward and planning, and it really helps once the week starts because I'm not scrambling around with like a million names reporting all at once. All right. So this upcoming week is going to be another really busy week. We started to get the tech titans this past week, and we're going to get more next week. Before they open on Monday, really like the only name of interest is Spotify right here. So it's priced in at 10.5 points. Personally, I haven't traded this one in a long time, and I don't really have a whole ton of interest in it, to be honest. Probably going to avoid it. It's the options are about average with what it's moved the last couple quarters at 10.5. So the options aren't cheap. The chart doesn't look great. Maybe it's due for a move, but I guess I'd rather wait and see and then go from there. Just because it hasn't really been a name that people have really traded, and the ranges haven't really warranted like laying out the money. That's just my personal opinion, but we'll see what the numbers look like and then go from there. After the close Monday, Google. So one of the big names next week. So looking at about 55 points. Um, Chart looks bullish. It didn't reward options last quarter. That was here. But the chart has really improved a lot, and it's going to be going into its report right at its 52-week high. Um, so I feel like it sets up well for like a bullish strategy. I guess like the issue is what I found with a lot of these Momo Fang names is that yes, Microsoft and Facebook popped, but then you had Amazon on Friday, which was just like, kind of like a sell the news event, right? So it's a little bit tougher to figure out what's priced in and what isn't. Facebook maybe moved more just because it was that gap above Microsoft, a little bit different setup, but Google, I mean, it seems like it wants to go higher. Maybe some sort of call spread, like a longer term call spread, or some sort of strategy, maybe to get the risk down, play for something a little bit more marginal on the upside. That would be how I'd be approaching Google. And XPI, kind of like a forgotten chip name. So they're looking for about 7 points. Um, it's kind of fallen off a lot of people's radars because after like all of like the M&A deal fell through, but it seems like there could be some potential. It's getting into the 100 range, and if it can reset above 100, could be some room up into like the teens. Options at 7 points, a little bit expensive, but it seems like it could play catch up to the sector, right? Which is way back, and it's getting hit today, but it's way back um, near its 52-week high, well off its December low, whereas NXPI still kind of working on that. So there could be a lot of upside here. So maybe speculative bullish position, maybe something a little bit longer dated, see if it gaps and maybe starts to grind and play catch up. That's what I'm thinking. Also, another chip name Monday, Western Digital. It's getting rocked today, partially off the Intel report. So looking for about 5 points, and it's tough. I mean, it was like a decent looking bullish flag above the 200-day, and now it's broken down. Uh, Coming off like a pretty big move on the last quarter, higher, but these chip stocks, they're a little bit tougher to gauge now. A lot of them have had big moves, and the upside, you're starting to see some sharper moves to the downside after the recent like huge amount of upside we saw on some of them. So if you're looking at it, maybe you could go to Micron, because Micron could be a nice sympathy trade. Also, Micron because STX is going to report next week as well. So you get Micron, you get Western Digital and STX. So odds are Micron's going to react to those. So that might be the way to play these two. Tuesday before the open, GLW Corning. It's priced in at about $1.80, $1.75, $1.80. And I feel like this one's set up pretty well for some sort of volatility strategy, like a strangle or a straddle. You can see just kind of bumping up. Well, it was bumping up. It rolled over this week, but it was bumping up into longer term resistance, right? Um, had a really sharp move, about a $4 move last quarter. It got a sizable gap underneath, a really well defined area of resistance above. Again, moved 4 last quarter, only priced in at $1.80. So I'm thinking options seem a little bit underpriced here. Could be bigger than priced in move on that one. GE, priced in about 75 cents or so. I this was one that we rode into 2019, and it really had like a nice rebound. It's broke that really aggressive uptrend now. It hasn't completely fallen apart, but it seems like the chart's a little bit broken at the moment, and earnings haven't been particularly great to really give you a whole ton of confidence in the upside scenario. So I'm thinking probably avoid, maybe if anything, some sort of cheap strangle, because the options at 75 cents. There is a pretty nice looking gap above. There's still a gap underneath, but I don't know. 75 cents. Maybe you see like $1. But I don't know. It doesn't really have a history of too much more than that. Maybe $1, $1.25. So it's kind of tough one. McDonald's. It's priced in at about 6.5 points. So chart looks great. Last quarter was solid. Peers have reported pretty solid numbers. So like Starbucks was last night, and pretty solid, but a little bit of sell the news. So I feel like McDonald's looks good. Chart looks good. The numbers have been solid, so bullish, but maybe a little bit more cautious just because it's had this big run into earnings here. And Starbucks kind of had a similar move and faded a little bit. So 6.5 points, it might end up being a little bit aggressive. So I feel like it wants to go higher, but probably have to be a little bit more cautious just with like this pretty sharp run that it's had ahead of earnings, right? Lilly, all right. So it's the farmer name. It's priced in about 3 points. Still an overhang on a lot of the healthcare names just in general, right? The whole healthcare sector, Medicare for all. It has rebounded, and the reason why I think Lilly is interesting is kind of more in the general context of reports next week, because you have like a bunch of pharma names, and actually that day, so Tuesday morning, you also have Pfizer and Merck, and I just feel like Lilly is typically a little bit better mover than those two, Pfizer or Merck. So 3 points. I feel like that's not too bad, and it's one of the more volatile of the pharma names. So you got some room lower, you got some room higher. It's priced in at 3. Maybe you see like 4, 4.5 to 5. And there's visibility for 4.5 to 5 higher, visibility for 4.5 to 5 lower. So kind of like that one. Maybe as like a strangle or straddle candidate there. Shopify, another name. It's a big one. Priced in at 19 points. This thing has just been on a really amazing run, right? Last month, last couple months, this was what it did last earnings. Personally, the way I've been treating a lot of these software stocks that have had really big moves into earnings is to avoid them. Options are expensive. It's had a really big move. Expectations are very high. It seems like these create better opportunities if they sell off post earnings. You look for the rebound into the sell off into moving average trend support. Look for a rebound. So if it ain't broke, I'm not going to fix it. It's worked on a handful of other software stocks over the last couple of months. So I guess that's what I'll be watching for Shopify. After the close Tuesday, here's an interesting one. AMD, pricing in about $3. So Intel obviously got destroyed on Friday, and the question is, are they stealing share from Intel, right? And that's what we're gonna watch on Tuesday after the bell. And this thing could be very volatile. I mean, there's gaps underneath. It has a history of pretty sharp moves. If they are stealing share from Intel, this could be kind of set up well from like a bullish point of view, right? Could be like have a path to like this high from September, October back in like the mid 30s. So definitely one of the more interesting ones next week. Apple. All right. $1 trillion question. Where, what are the expectations on this, right? Like, I mean, it had arguably one of its worst quarters in years last year in January, and the stock has done nothing but go up. So it's our expectations very low and it's set up to outperform, or our expectations a lot higher because the stock performance has been a lot better. I mean, it's really tough to gauge. They're looking for about a 9.5 point move for earnings next week. Uh, Personally, I feel like it's a little bit more favorable as a bearish setup, right? Because come all the way back to close the gap. I mean, it does have another gap above it, but still, I mean, up a lot in a short period, and I mean, some of the indicators are the numbers probably not going to be too great. So last quarter wasn't good by any stretch. It's up a lot, so maybe looking for some sort of pullback, possibly into like the 190s down into like the 200-day area again. But they're pricing in at about 9.5 points, and I mean that's obviously going to be one of the biggest names next week. Akamai, here's a kind of under the radar play. So looking at about $5 for Akamai, and what's interesting is that it's pushing up into like this really key area of long-term resistance, right? So it hasn't been a huge mover on earnings recently, but it also hasn't had this interesting of a setup in a while. So maybe speculative bullish play, right? If it can turn in a decent number and start to get up into the low 80s, could really have a significant breakout. So that's what I'm watching on Akamai. Tandem. Small cap healthcare play just had an absolute blowout last quarter. Has not closed the entire gap. It's rolled over along with like a lot of the healthcare names. It's pricing in a lot, so about 8.5 points. But it was a huge mover last quarter, and I feel like that strength of a beat probably translates to some sort of positive momentum this quarter. So I'm thinking something more bullish, but probably more modest, just because the sector kind of has a little bit of an overhang on it. So maybe like targeting something back up into like the low 70s from where it was like a few weeks ago. Twilio, another big software name. Again, same strategy as Shopify. And actually, Twilio, this is what we did with it last quarter when it sold off. We looked for a quick rebound, right? Sold off to the trend line support and rebounded real fast. So same thing. It's pricing in 16 points, so obviously options are pretty expensive. Sold the news last quarter, even though like the numbers were pretty solid. So looking for the same thing. Just, I'll be on the sidelines for this, wait for a pullback. Wednesday before the open, Amarin. So this is like a small cap bio. The pricing in a little over 2, and a lot of the weekly scripts have been strong. So I think people are anticipating a pretty big guidance raise on this one. It's held where it needed to. It rolled over, held where it needed to though. And I feel like if they really do materially take up guidance, I feel like it could get back into like the 20s pretty quick, right? You got like a path to like the 22, 23 area relatively fast. So that's what I'm keeping an eye out for on Amarin. Also, CVS, another healthcare name on Wednesday. So pricing in 3 points, and it was crushed last quarter. Okay, so it was crushed last quarter. Walgreens was just crushed on earnings. Just a really tight bear pennant, right, at its 52-week low. So I feel like the chart leans bearish, but even at 3 points, I feel like the options maybe just underpriced in general. I mean, maybe look at it like a strangle, skewed more to like the bear side. But it moved about 6 last quarter. Walgreens just had a much bigger than anticipated move, and healthcare has been more volatile. So this seems to be indicating a bigger move than what's priced in. So that's what we're watching on CBS. Estee Lauder, retail name, actually one of the top retail names right now. It's priced in at $10. Pure L'Oreal had just recently had strong results. This is in a really like steady grind up into its high, and it's coming off a good quarter. Uh, it looks bullish, but at 10 points, I feel like that's not bad. Like Estee Lauder's had some pretty big moves in the past. I mean, it was almost $20 last quarter, so maybe look at like a strangle, some sort of cheap strangle in this, just in case they slip up. Could have some downside. Maybe it's back into like the 160, even like 150 range, right? So one of the more interesting retail names next week, that's for sure. After the close Wednesday, Acadia. So another small cap bio, pricing in about 2.25. I've had this one on my radar for a while, and I'm actually thinking the options might be a little bit underpriced. Just it's just in terms of like revenues and guidance. They got some upcoming drug data coming out. Chart looks interesting, right? Kind of held like a pretty critical area here. So just a kind of a combination of things. Two and a quarter, not too bad. So it's about a 10% move, give or take. So I might look at some options on that one. Haven't traded this one in a long time though. Cheesecake. Restaurant stocks have been great. This one's been lagging a bit. It's priced in 3.5 points. It's definitely acting better after last quarter, and it's poking its head above the 200-day. So possible bullish breakout here if they can deliver, right? Because the restaurant stocks have been pretty good, just as like a group. This one's been lagging a bit. Now it's kind of removed near-term resistance, and it has some space to run. So maybe if they can deliver, you could see a move up into like the high 50s. So that's what I'm thinking on that. Dexcom, another healthcare play. So this one you guys are probably familiar with. We traded this one a few times over the last year. What I love about Dexcom is just that it's a really consistent mover. It's priced in at 13 points this quarter. And I mean, this one's very volatile, very, very volatile name, and it typically moves. So I feel like those options look underpriced. I mean, they got absolutely drubbed back down into like the low of its range, right? So it's got a pretty big area underneath, a really significant gap, way off its high. Healthcare in general has been particularly volatile, and the 13 points are a little bit under their average move over the last 3 quarters. So everything seems to be pointing for some sort of volatility strategy on Dexcom. Qualcomm, this will be an interesting one. So the pricing in 5 points, and to be honest, I have absolutely no idea what to expect. I mean, it was up $30 in the last week, and I mean, one of the biggest moves in the history of the stock. So really, I don't know what to expect. I don't know if earnings are going to be a significant catalyst, but I have seen a lot of longer-term call buying. So it does appear that smart money still thinks there's upside. Whether or not there's a lot of upside on this report, I don't know. But that's definitely something to keep an eye on. I might just view this one from the sideline though. I mean, after this move, I really don't know what to do with it. Square. All right, so Square's pricing in 5.25, and this thing has acted awful after last quarter, and I know because we were sitting in it, right? So just has had zero life since it last reported, and it's just been in an increasingly tight range. The thing with Square is that it tends to react negative to numbers. They have a history of like beating and lowering guidance, and thing tends to like open red. So not great reactions to numbers, not great action recently. So you got to be a little bit more careful. I feel like this thing is just due for a move, like whether it's up or down. I mean, it just seems like it's due. This stock has, I mean, this is by far like the longest period of sideways action this has had for several years, as you can see, right? So it just seems like it's due for a move up or down. So 525, yes, they're not cheap, but considering it hasn't really done anything in several months, I'm thinking that there could be a pretty big move pent up on this one. So probably some sort of strangle I'll be looking at. Thursday before the open, Kellogg. All right, so probably not your go-to name, but I feel like this one's a little bit interesting. It's priced in at 3 points. Kraft Heinz was horrendous. General Mills recently was pretty good. I feel like those are two pretty close comparables. So what's Keller going to have, right? It's breaking through the top of resistance here, and at $3, I mean, I feel like there's visibility maybe for like a $4 to $5 move, right? I mean, maybe not like a home run potential, right? But four or $5, like breaking up. You got the 200-day obvious target above, 52-week low, obvious target below. So $4 to $5 either way. Options when looking for three, so it's not bad. SSYS, 3D printer. So pricing in about 2.5 points. It's pricing in 2.5 points this quarter. Last quarter moved four, actually a little bit over four. So I feel like the options aren't too bad. Pretty tight consolidation. Still has a gap underneath. Now has a gap above. So a couple gaps. Tight consolidation. History of moving more than what's priced in. I mean, it's been kind of a dog, but it does seem like there could be potential for a decent move. Maybe not like on the magnitude of 6 or 7, but maybe you get like a 3.5, 4. Options are only priced in at 2.5, so something to take a look at. Under Armour, here you go. So some of the bigger retail names start coming up next week. So pricing in about 2.5 points, and I feel like this chart is really setting up for like a bullish move. It's been a little bit tougher of a name to trade, and the earnings reactions been a little bit smaller over the last couple quarters. But it's holding in nicely, and it's within striking distance of this 25 area, and above that, there's just a ton of room to run. So I'm thinking bullish. But maybe look at something speculative just up in that 25 area, just because if it does get through there with some momentum, there's a ton of room higher. Wayfair, another big retail name. So this one is looking for about, say, like 20 points, coming off just a massive move back in February. It's up a ton since last quarter, and it's hard to think that there's that magnitude of upside in this name still. Options are pretty expensive. I mean, that would put it back up at the high. So I guess you could look, maybe at a retest of that high, or obviously there's a big gap underneath. This one's been I've tried this. I've tried this one a few times in the past, and I've had mixed success with it. So I'm a little bit more hesitant to trade it. So that's why I'll probably avoid it. But $20, like maybe that's on the high end, but maybe you can see 20, 25. Like it seems like it's coming off such like a strong quarter, probably slightly bullish bias, but I just don't know if you're going to see like the huge upside like you did last quarter. Yeti, all right. Recent IPO, thing's been on fire. So it's right at 52-week high. Pricing in about 5.5 points though, so options are on the high end of like the average trading range on this thing. I'm not sure that you saw a 5.5 point move on any given day on this ever. So yes, the stock has been great. The chart looks great. The numbers have been really solid, but laying out $5.5, that's above basically any move that it's ever had. So you really got to have some conviction with this one, and I guess I don't. I feel like it looks great, but maybe you look for a pullback if it like rolls over. It did have like a sell the news move back in December, so maybe if it rolls over back into the trend, you can snag those for a better deal. So that's probably what I'll end up doing with Yeti. After the bell Thursday, kind of a busy lineup here. So Acacia, treated this one last quarter, caught that big breakout, right? And stock has been acting pretty good since. Now they're looking at $7.5, so the options are a little bit more expensive, but it still seems like there's pretty good momentum behind this. Coming off a beat and raise, stock has been acting good, and as you can see, the chart is working on this really long-term rounded bottom, so there's plenty of space higher. So still thinking bullish, still thinking upside potential. Probably would have to look at some sort of spread, though, just to get the risk down a bit on Acacia. Activision. So this will be the first of the gaming stocks, and it's priced in about $3.75 or so. I feel like you could make the justification that the options are a little bit underpriced, right? Like, got it's gotten smacked around. Been some big moves in this. There's plenty of space higher. It's about $6, $7 just to drop to retest the low. So I feel like these gaming stocks have been pretty volatile. So 375. I feel like that's not bad. If you wanted to look at something else, you could possibly look at Take Two, maybe for a sympathy trade. I'm hesitant to say EA just because EA has been kind of moving on its own. Take Two has been a little bit more correlated. EA has been kind of doing its own thing on the Apex Legends launch. So that's why I say if you want to look at a sympathy trade, maybe Take Two is a better one. Also Thursday, Expedia. So it's pricing in 8.5 points, and I mean this thing has just really been like dead money for months. Hasn't been a big earnings mover, really. I mean it's had some moves on earnings, but it hasn't really been a huge earnings mover. The range is getting a little bit tighter. Maybe it's due, like it just seems like it's like a sleeping giant. Like it's just one of those names that hasn't done anything in so long that eventually once it finally wakes up or really drops that it's gonna have a really big move, but it just hasn't done anything in so long, and it's been less of an earnings story. So it's kind of hard to lay out the money, but it always has like that potential, right? Like you always think it's like a sleeping giant where there could be like a really big move coming after like such like a period of nothingness on it. So don't necessarily have a strategy, but wait and see how the week goes, and maybe if the options look good, then take a shot on it. For solar, so this is pricing in about 4.5. Chart looks pretty good. Nice tight bullish flag, right? Had a pretty big jump in April. Nice tight bullish flag. So again, working on a pretty long rounded bottom, right? Nice rounded bottom. Still has plenty of room higher. I feel like it's set up for higher prices, but the numbers recently have been very mixed. Like last quarter missed last quarter, but got it higher. So the numbers haven't been spectacular. You could maybe look at like a wider strangle, right? Like say something up in like the high 60s versus like something in the mid 50s in case it like drops and closes the gap. 4.5 points though, it doesn't seem bad. I mean, there's been some bigger moves than this one in the past, so that's definitely one I'll have on my radar next week. Mercado Libre. So this one, we caught this one last quarter when they had like this really huge pent up breakout. The stock has been incredible since then. It's up a ton, and options are going to reflect that. So they're looking at like a 45-point move this time around. Stock is up a lot. I'm almost treating this like one of those software setups. Like the stock is up a lot. It's a little bit extended. Options are more expensive. Expectations are higher. So probably will avoid this time around. And maybe if it's like doesn't do a whole lot or pulls back, get an opportunity to reload this one. Shake Shack. All right. So haven't traded this one too recently, but it's starting to set up pretty well again, as you can see. I mean, pushing back up into like this October kind of resistance area, and it hasn't been a great mover on earnings, but the chart starting to set up pretty constructively. Restaurant stocks in general have been acting better, right? So it's pricing in 5.25. So the options are expensive, but it's still pretty heavily shorted, and it really seems like it could explode if they actually like put together a strong like beat and raise. I mean, a really obvious target up at 70. So maybe look at some sort of call spread, something speculative bullish, just in case they deliver. You get that breakout, you get that short squeeze, and then you get that retest of 70. So that's what I'm thinking on Shake Shack. All right, Friday before the open, last but not least, right? VFC. So this is actually the only interesting one, and they actually aren't confirmed for Friday yet. So don't know if they're going to report or not. They haven't confirmed, so I'll be on the watch for that. But the stock looks really good, and it's been on a nice run. Coming off like a big quarter in January, stock has been acting great, and it's bumping up right into like this key longer-term area of resistance. So I feel like it could be a pretty big mover. Looks good, but I'm just going to have to wait for that press release confirming when their actual earnings date is. All right? So, lots to look forward to next week. You can see just a ton of big names. I mean, like those are like not even a half of it. I mean, there's so many other ones out there that I just didn't have time to go over. So plenty to do, plenty to look forward to. So rest up, relax, and get ready for a very, 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 very busy week. All right, guys. So have a wonderful weekend, and I will talk to you guys all on Monday.